For 350 years, men lined up to kiss the lips of a dead queen. Her corpse lay on display at Westminster Abbey, exposed to every stranger's touch. They fondled her remains. They tore away bones and teeth as macabre souvenirs. This was not fantasy. It was documented history. Older versions of Sleeping Beauty weren't love stories. In one, a king rapes an unconscious girl. She gives birth to twins with her eyes still closed. A jealous queen plans to cook those children and feed them to their father. In a forbidden manuscript the church tried to erase, a beautiful young woman lay paralyzed but fully aware, trapped for decades in a chapel where men came to violate her motionless body. Her mind screamed in terror, but she could not speak, move, or even blink. Welcome to the Pandoras Project. What the world celebrates as Sleeping Beauty, a tale of true love's awakening, is, at its heart, the story of centuries of cruelty, silence, and control. The Brothers Grimm erased the horror. Disney painted on a smile. But behind the polished versions lies a truth both disturbing and forgotten. Women's bodies, treated as trophies, objects, and symbols to be claimed. Tonight, we peel back every layer. From Italian horror and forbidden monastery archives, to royal tombs ravaged by time and mythic goddesses who spun the fates of mortals, every thread leads somewhere darker. What was hidden will be exposed. Subscribe and help reveal what the polished fairy tale tried to keep sealed. The next secret won't stay buried. The thorns were never meant to guard the sleeping princess. They were meant to keep you from ever seeing what happened to her inside. Part 1. The Sanitized version. The version the world knows begins simply enough. A king and queen celebrate their newborn daughter by inviting 12 wise women to bless her. But they possess only 12 golden plates, so a 13th wise woman receives no invitation. 11 wise women bestow their gifts: virtue, beauty, wealth, everything imaginable. Then the hall grows cold. The 13th wise woman appears, fury twisting her face. She pronounces a curse that echoes off stone walls. In her 15th year, the princess will prick her finger on a spindle and fall down dead. Before anyone responds, she vanishes. The 12th wise woman softens the curse. The princess will not die, but fall into deep sleep lasting 100 years. The king orders every spindle in the kingdom burned. 15 years pass. On her 15th birthday, the princess explores a forgotten tower and finds an old woman working a spinning wheel. The moment her finger touches the needle, blood wells. She collapses into enchanted sleep. The spell spreads through the castle. Everyone falls asleep mid-step. Around the walls, a hedge of thorns begins growing, thick and impenetrable. Many princes come to rescue her. The thorns wrap around them mercilessly. Young men die terrible deaths, their bodies caught in vines, bones breaking, flesh tearing, until they become withered corpses tangled in the hedge. 100 years later, a prince arrives. The thorns pull back, transforming into flowers. He walks through the silent castle, finds the princess, and kisses her lips. Her eyes open. The spell shatters. They marry and live happily ever after. The Brothers Grimm revised this story multiple times, removing disturbing elements. The symbolism reads clearly. The curse represents the transition to womanhood. The pricked finger and blood symbolize menstruation. The long sleep suggests women should remain passive, waiting for the right man. But this sanitized version still hides something darker. The Italian story, recorded over 150 years earlier, contains elements the Grimm brothers knew they could never include. Part 2. The Violation. In 1636, an Italian poet named Giambattista Basile published a collection for aristocratic audiences. Among its tales was Sun, Moon, and Talia, revealing the horror later versions concealed. A nobleman is blessed with a daughter named Talia. Seers warn that flax will endanger her. To protect her, he bans all flax from his household. Talia grows into a beautiful young woman. One day, she sees an old woman passing with a spindle and, fascinated, invites her in to learn. As Talia takes the spindle, a splinter of flax pierces her fingernail. She collapses, appearing dead. Her father, shattered by grief, cannot bear to bury her. He places her body on a velvet throne in his country estate, locks the doors, and abandons the property. Time passes. A king hunting nearby has his falcon fly through a window of the abandoned house. He enters to retrieve it and discovers Talia seated on her throne, so lifelike he believes she sleeps. He calls to her, shakes her gently. She does not wake. Her beauty inflames his desire beyond control. What happens next, Basile describes delicately for his sophisticated audience. The king carries Talia to a bed and gathers the first fruits of love. Then he returns to his kingdom and forgets her completely. 9 months later, still unconscious, Talia gives birth to twins. Fairies attend the delivery and place the infants at her breasts. One day, one baby accidentally sucks on Talia's finger and draws out the flax splinter. Talia wakes to find herself with 2 children she has never seen before. Confused but overwhelmed by love, she begins caring for them, naming them Sun and Moon. Eventually, the king remembers and returns. Astonished to find her awake with children, he spends several days with them, then rides back to his palace, promising to return. But the king is married. His wife, Queen Isabella, hears him speaking Talia's name in his sleep. She summons the royal secretary and threatens execution unless he reveals what he knows. Terrified, he confesses everything. Consumed by jealousy, the queen orders the secretary to fetch the children, claiming the king requested them. Talia, trusting, agrees. The queen orders her cook to kill the children and prepare their flesh as a meal. The cook cannot murder children. He hides Sun and Moon with his wife and instead prepares 2 lambs. That evening, the queen serves the king personally. He eats with enthusiasm, praising the exceptional flavor. Each time he compliments the dish, she repeats coldly, "Eat well, for you are eating what is yours." The queen then orders Talia brought to the palace. When Talia arrives expecting welcome, she finds the queen waiting with guards and a roaring fire in the courtyard. The queen announces her intention to burn Talia alive. Talia begs to remove her clothing first so she might not die in these fine garments. The queen, wanting the expensive clothes, agrees. Talia removes her layers slowly, crying out loudly with each piece, hoping someone will hear. Her cries reach the king, who rushes to the courtyard demanding answers. The queen, laughing, tells him he has just feasted on his own children. The king, enraged, orders the queen thrown into the fire she prepared for Talia. But the cook steps forward and reveals his deception, bringing forth Sun and Moon alive and unharmed. The king rewards the cook generously, marries Talia, and they live together in happiness. This version entertained 17th century Italian nobility, the rape of an unconscious woman, the birth without consent, the cannibalistic revenge. These were not problems, but rather compelling elements. Yet even this brutal story cannot compare to what was recorded in an Austrian monastery and hidden for centuries. Part 3. The Forbidden Manuscript. In the archives of an Austrian monastery lies a manuscript. The church denied it existed until 1891, when a historian found fragments locked in a vault. The pages are badly damaged. Sections have been rendered illegible by time or deliberately destroyed. Other passages have been blacked out with heavy ink. What survives paints a picture far worse than any fairy tale. The account begins in the mid-14th century with a nobleman's daughter in Lower Austria. Her name has been scratched out wherever it appears. The manuscript describes her as extraordinarily beautiful, betrothed to a neighboring lord, with the wedding planned for her 16th birthday. At her baptism, an old village seer arrived uninvited, deliberately excluded after a dispute with the family. Standing in the chapel doorway, she spoke a curse the scribe recorded. In her 16th year she will taste death, but death will not take her. She will be trapped between worlds, awake in sleep, screaming without a voice, for as long as the stars decree. The count dismissed this as ravings, but took precautions, consulting physicians and keeping his daughter watched. It made no difference. On her 16th birthday, servants found her lying motionless. Her skin felt cold. No breath. No pulse. The physicians declared her dead. But her body did not decay. After 3 days, her flesh remained exactly as it had been. Her father refused to have her buried. He moved her to a chapel on his estate, placed her on a stone platform beneath silk canopies. He told himself she awaited resurrection. Here the manuscript changes. The scribe describes what no one understood. The young woman was not dead. She was not unconscious. She was trapped, fully aware, inside a body that would not respond. She could hear every sound, feel every sensation, think with perfect clarity, but she could not move even a finger, could not speak, could not blink or close her eyes. Her lungs no longer drew breath, yet consciousness remained, locked inside motionless flesh. The manuscript says she screamed endlessly in her mind, begging for death, but no sound ever passed her lips. The legend of the beautiful maiden who did not decay spread through the countryside. Travelers came to see her. Pilgrims prayed beside her. And others came with different intentions. The manuscript is explicit. Men visited the chapel. Some only looked. Others touched her face, her hands, her hair, and some did far worse. She felt everything, every violation, every moment. She screamed inside her paralyzed body while her face remained serene, giving no sign of the agony she endured. The most horrifying detail appears later. Her body began showing changes, a swelling in her belly. The abbess of a nearby convent, observing the situation, understood. 9 months after the curse took hold, in the darkness of that chapel, the young woman's body gave birth to a child. She experienced every moment fully conscious. The pain, the monk writes, surpassed all description. She could not cry out, could not push. Her body performed the act without her control, and she endured it aware of every sensation, every tearing, every impossible horror. The abbess took the infant away immediately. The manuscript provides no record of what became of it. The young woman remained in the chapel. The visits continued, and the manuscript hints this birth was not the only one. Over following years, perhaps decades, the pattern repeated. The text mentions multiple pregnancies, though the exact number has been redacted. The monk writes that the church was aware. Officials knew. The abbess knew. They chose silence, fearing revelation would destroy their authority. So the secret was kept. The young woman suffered without anyone to speak for her. The men who violated her faced no consequences. The end disturbs even more. After countless years, her body finally began to age. Her flesh started to decay. The monk writes that in those final months, she no longer prayed for deliverance. She prayed for revenge. The curse ended not with a kiss, but in what the scribe called divine wrath made manifest. One night, every man known to have visited that chapel was found dead in his bed, faces frozen in absolute terror. The young woman vanished from the chapel. Her body was never recovered. The building was declared cursed and torn down. The monk ends with a warning. Some curses punish not the cursed, but those who mistake helplessness for permission. What happened was not a tale of love, but a record of what humans become when they believe another cannot refuse them. The church suppressed this manuscript not because of supernatural content, but because it revealed complicity at the highest levels. All known copies were ordered destroyed. Whether this records actual events or springs from traumatized imagination cannot be proven. But the effort to erase this story suggests they had something to hide. And the parallels to other tales, to Talia, to all the stories of sleeping women giving birth, feel too precise to dismiss. What makes this disturbing is that we know such things did happen. We have records. For centuries, the bodies of dead women were displayed, and men were permitted to touch them, kiss them, violate their remains without consequence. Part 4. The corpse on display. This is not fiction. In 1437, Catherine of Valois died. What happened to her corpse is recorded in the official documents of Westminster Abbey. Catherine was Queen of England, wife to King Henry V. After her death, she received a dignified burial at Westminster Abbey in London. During her funeral, craftsmen created a wooden effigy dressed in royal garments and fitted with a wig of human hair. That effigy still exists today. But the effigy is not the disturbing part. In the early 16th century, during renovations at Westminster Abbey, workers accidentally damaged her tomb. The stone coffin broke open, exposing the upper portion of her body. What they discovered left them stunned. Catherine's remains were almost perfectly preserved. Accounts describe her as appearing merely asleep, her features intact, her skin still smooth. The workers set her body aside, planning to rebury her properly once construction finished. But word spread quickly. The beautiful queen who seemed only to sleep became first a curiosity, then an attraction. Her body remained exposed, accessible to anyone who visited Westminster Abbey and wished to see her. For over 300 years, Catherine of Valois lay on display. The diarist Samuel Pepys visited her on February 23, 1669, his birthday. He recorded the experience in his diary with disturbing casualness. "I did see the body of Queen Catherine of Valois, and I had the upper part of her body in my hands, and I did kiss her mouth, reflecting upon it that I did kiss a queen." Kissing Catherine's corpse became something of a tradition among visitors. This fascination drew partly from Shakespeare's play Henry V, written in 1599, where the king tells Catherine that her lips are witchcraft. People believed, even centuries after her death, that kissing her held some kind of power or significance, so they lined up to press their lips against the mouth of a dead woman. The mistreatment escalated. In 1768, records note that schoolboys visiting the abbey amused themselves by poking at her body, pressing their fingers into her flesh, tearing at her burial clothes. By the late 18th century, a visitor described what remained as a shapeless mass of whitish material. The beautiful sleeping queen had degraded into something unrecognizable, destroyed by generations of handling. Finally, in 1878, more than 440 years after her death, Catherine's remains were properly reinterred beneath the floor of Westminster Abbey. By then, significant portions of her body had disappeared. The entire front of her skull was gone. Most of her vertebrae had vanished. All but one of her ribs were missing. 2 bones from her right arm could not be found. Every single tooth had been taken. Visitors had apparently removed pieces of her as souvenirs over the centuries, bit by bit dismantling her corpse. Notably, her legs, which had remained wrapped in silk throughout this entire period, were still remarkably well preserved. Reports described the skin as smooth and supple even after more than 4 centuries. The parts of her body that had been protected survived. The parts exposed to human contact were destroyed. For nearly 350 years, Catherine of Valois lay available for anyone to touch, to kiss, to take pieces from as keepsakes. She was treated not as a person who had died, but as an object, a curiosity, a beautiful thing that existed for others to possess. The only difference between Catherine and the fairy tale princess is that Catherine never woke. She remained silent, passive, and available. The ideal of perfect womanhood. Beautiful, pure, incapable of refusing anything. And the Church permitted this. Westminster Abbey, one of England's most important religious sites, allowed the public exhibition and violation of a queen's body for over 3 centuries. Part 5. The Incorrupt Saints. The Church called it incorruptibility, a sign of holiness. But the practice revealed something else about how medieval Europe viewed women's bodies. Throughout Catholic Europe, particularly during medieval times, women whose bodies showed no signs of decay after death were treated as blessed by God. The phenomenon was regarded as proof of divine favor. These bodies were not buried respectfully. They were exhumed, dressed in religious garments, and put on permanent display in churches for public veneration. St. Catherine of Valois died in 1463. Weeks after her burial, her grave was opened and her body found intact, reportedly giving off a sweet fragrance. This was interpreted as a sign of her sanctity. She was removed from the earth, dressed in her religious habit, and placed on a throne in the Church of Corpus Domini in Bologna, Italy. She sits there still today, over 550 years later, her mummified body on display for pilgrims and tourists. Similar cases exist throughout Europe. Saint Bernadette of Lourdes, Saint Clare of Assisi, Saint Teresa of Avila, women whose preserved bodies became objects of religious devotion and, disturbingly, of fascination that went beyond the spiritual. Why were women's bodies especially valued for this practice? The answer lies in medieval beliefs about female flesh itself. Medieval medicine operated on the theory of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Balance between these humors determined health and character. According to this system, women were believed to have excess phlegm and blood, making them prone to disease, decay, and moral weakness. The word hysteria comes from the Greek word for womb. Women were considered inherently unstable. Christian teaching reinforced these ideas. Women carried the burden of Eve's sin, her susceptibility to temptation in Eden. Female sexuality was dangerous. Female will was suspect. Women required constant guidance and control to prevent corruption of body and soul. Against this backdrop, the incorruptible female body became a powerful symbol. Here was a woman whose flesh defied the weakness supposedly inherent to her sex. She had transcended human limitation through purity and obedience. She was passive in death as in life. She was the perfect woman. The sleeping princess mirrors this exactly. She does not age during her century of sleep. Her beauty remains untouched. She is pure, virginal, and completely passive. She does nothing. She simply exists, preserved, waiting for a man to claim her. Her incorruptibility proves her virtue. Her awakening through a kiss validates her worth, confirming that a woman's value is determined by whether a man chooses her. The parallels extend further. In several versions, the sleeping princess gives birth while unconscious. This echoes the Immaculate Conception, the idea that the Virgin Mary conceived Jesus without sin, without agency, purely as a vessel. The sleeping princess becomes a secular version of the same ideal. A woman so pure that even conception requires no participation or awareness on her part. These stories, and the practice of displaying dead women, serve the same purpose. They reinforce the notion that the perfect woman does not act, does not resist, does not decay. She exists as a beautiful object, available to be touched, kissed, and possessed, but never heard. Part 6. The First Sleeper. To find where this pattern began, we must go back to the 14th century, to a French text called Perceforest. This massive work invents a legendary history connecting ancient Britain to the world of King Arthur. Hidden within its pages is the story of Princess Zelindine, considered the earliest written version of Sleeping Beauty. At Zelindine's birth, 3 goddesses arrive: Lucina, Themis, and Venus. During the feast, Themis receives an inferior knife and, offended by this slight, curses the infant. The first time Zelindine touches flax, she will prick her finger and fall into eternal sleep. Venus, however, promises to save her. Years later, Celandine grows beautiful and falls in love with a Scottish knight named Troilus. One day, Troilus learns that Celandine has fallen into enchanted sleep while spinning. Desperate, he travels to Venus's temple for guidance. The goddess gives him a cryptic message. If you pick from the slit the fruit that bears the cure, the girl will be healed. Troilus does not understand. He travels to the tower where Celandine sleeps, finding her undressed on a bed, her beauty unmarred by the curse. He tries to wake her with a kiss. She does not stir. Finally, Venus's meaning becomes clear to him. Overwhelmed by desire and the goddess's command, he consummates his love with her while she sleeps, leaving his ring on her finger before departing. 9 months later, still unconscious, Celandine gives birth to a son. The infant, seeking milk, accidentally sucks the flax splinter from her finger. She wakes to find herself no longer a virgin, with a child she does not remember conceiving. When she sees the ring, she realizes it was Troilus and takes comfort in knowing it was the man she loved. Shortly after, a creature steals the baby through the tower window. Despite this loss, the child survives and grows to become a great knight, eventually recognized as an ancestor of Lancelot, the legendary hero of Arthur's court. This earliest version contains all the key elements that would persist: the prophecy at birth, the curse tied to spinning, the sleep, the arrival of a man, and the conception without consent. But here, the union is framed as destined and noble because it produces a hero. The child's greatness supposedly justifies how he was conceived. This reflects ancient beliefs about fate being predetermined by divine powers. In Greek mythology, the Moirai spun the thread of every mortal life. In Norse tradition, the Norns did the same. These fate goddesses were depicted with spindles and looms, literally weaving destiny. The spinning wheel that causes the princess's sleep directly references these ancient figures who controlled human fate. The prophecy given at birth, the inescapable curse, the spindle sealing her destiny, all point to the belief that what will happen cannot be changed. The princess will sleep. The man will come. The child will be born. Part 7. The Fate Weavers. But even Perceforest was recording something older. The pattern appears in Greek mythology, in Norse sagas, in stories told for thousands of years. Danae was daughter to King Acrisius of Argos. An oracle prophesied that her son would kill the king. Terrified, Acrisius imprisoned Danae in a bronze chamber deep beneath his palace where no man could reach her. But Zeus, king of the gods, desired her. He visited her as a shower of gold, entering the sealed chamber and impregnating her. When Acrisius discovered Danae had given birth to Perseus, he sealed mother and child in a wooden chest and cast them into the sea. They survived. Perseus grew to become one of Greece's greatest heroes, slaying Medusa and ultimately, through tragic accident, fulfilling the prophecy by killing his grandfather. In Norse mythology, Brunhild was a Valkyrie who disobeyed Odin. As punishment, he stripped her immortality and cursed her to live as a mortal. Fearing she would be claimed by a coward, Odin placed one mercy upon her. He pierced her with the thorn of sleep and laid her on a mountain surrounded by fire. Only a hero brave enough to cross the flames could reach her. Siegfried accomplished this, found Brunhild asleep in armor, and removed her breastplate. She awoke. They fell in love, and though their story ends in tragedy, their union shaped the fate of kingdoms. These myths from Greece to Scandinavia share a common thread. Fate is predetermined by divine forces, often represented as goddesses who spin, weave, and cut the threads of mortal lives. The Greek Moirai, the Roman Parse, the Norse Norns, all depicted with spindles and shears, deciding at birth how long each person would live and what they would accomplish. No mortal could change what the fates decreed. But there is another pattern woven through all these stories. In every version, The woman has no agency. She is locked away, cursed, or put to sleep. She does not choose her fate. She does not choose the man. She does not consent to what happens. Yet the story frames this as acceptable, even noble, because a hero is born. The violation is justified by the outcome. This is what these myths taught for thousands of years, that women's bodies, women's choices, women's voices are secondary to the demands of destiny, of lineage, of power. Final part. The breaking seals. Now the pattern lies exposed. Sleeping Beauty was never a love story. It was always a record of how societies have treated women's bodies throughout history, as objects to be controlled, displayed, touched, and claimed without consent or consequence. From the Greeks who locked Danae away, to the medieval church that displayed Catherine of Valois for 350 years, to the monks who buried the manuscript from St. Pölten, the thread runs unbroken. Women were expected to be passive, pure, and silent. Their value lay not in their will, but in their beauty and availability. The sleeping princess embodies this perfectly. She does nothing. She waits. When the man arrives, she is his. The stories justified this. They made passivity a virtue. They framed violation as destiny. They taught that a woman's purpose was to endure, to accept, and to produce the heroes and kings that men required. When real women's bodies were put on display, kissed by strangers, torn apart for souvenirs, the same logic applied. They were no longer people. They were symbols. Lessons in feminine perfection. The Brothers Grimm softened the tale because even they understood the original revealed too much. Basile kept the rape because his audience saw nothing wrong with it. The church buried the manuscript because it exposed their complicity. We retell the story with true love's kiss because we want to believe the past was more romantic than it was. But the archives do not lie. The bodies on display do not lie. The pattern woven through myth, folklore, and history does not lie. Sleeping Beauty was never about awakening. It was about control. The thorniest hedge was never meant to protect the princess. It was meant to keep you from seeing what really happened inside. If this helped you see what the fairy tale once was, support this work by leaving a like. Subscribe so you are here when the next sealed tomb opens. Which version of this story did you grow up with, and what do you think was removed? Share your thoughts below. See you in the next tomb.